Rewatching movies is an invariably fascinating experience. It's always interesting to return to a film and discover new dimensions, new interpretations, and new qualities you didn't see the first time around. Quite often, one may put a film on and their entire view of the movie will change. Maybe it was much better than it first appeared, or on a less positive note, much worse, which is always a bit disappointing. There are also plenty of movies out there that never lose their charm even on multiple viewings, and serve as delightful comfort food we can return to time and time again. Who among us hasn't seen Back to the Future half a dozen times? Or Star Wars, or Raiders of the Lost Ark, or It's a Wonderful Life? All of that being said, not all movies are made to be revisited though. There are plenty of films out there that, despite their considerable quality, are not movies that many will want to sit through again. And these following 10 2020s movies are all good examples of this. They're all strong pieces of cinema that should absolutely be seen, but a revisit might not make sense to a great many film lovers. So I am Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 10 awesome recent movies you'll never watch again. Number 10, Dashcam. Polarizing though it was, Dashcam is actually a good horror film in many departments, presenting a successful variation of the found footage formula. Not only is Dashcam's format, presented as a vlogger's live stream, inventive and timely, but the film also offers up an array of powerful heart-in-mouth scares. Director Rob Savage makes good on the promise he showed in his excellent debut, the Zoom-filmed horror host, and reaffirms himself as a master of the subgenre. So why won't people want to see it again? Well, for the same reason that quite a few people couldn't get into the film on their first viewing. The protagonist, Annie Hardy, playing a fictionalized version of herself, is, well, kind of evil. A snarky, rude, and gratingly obnoxious conspiracy theorist and social media grifter, Annie is one of the most unlikable horror leads in recent memory. This was, well, it was a choice, alright, and it almost seemed like Savage was testing the audience's resolve, challenging them to still root for this character's survival, as well as horrid as she undeniably is. And she does indeed make it through the film, which no doubt angered plenty of viewers. As such, whatever strengths the film unquestionably has, putting up with Annie's nonsense for another 80 minutes of your life is not the most enticing of prospects, so many people likely won't bother. Number 9, In a Violent Nature. Have you ever wondered what a Friday the 13th film would look like if it was shot from the perspective of Jason Voorhees? Well, if you have, then In a Violent Nature is that movie for you, folks. And if you've not, well, go watch something else. This Canadian slasher flick is a fascinating, visually stunning experiment that takes a traditional slasher narrative and flips it on its head. The final 10 minutes switch perspective to a Final Girl-esque figure, but the rest of it follows a silent, undead killer as he carries out his brutal deeds. The film is light on dialogue, and the killer's victims are peripheral ciphers for the most part. It's an impressive piece of filmmaking, and something that horror fans should not sleep on. But given that we spend most of it following around a literal zombie, it is by nature a distant, impersonal film, and watching it again might not appeal particularly. It's also such a minimalist, stripped-down work that a second viewing may not reveal anything you hadn't already caught the first time around. And unlike with most slasher films, we actually get an ending that wraps everything up neatly and doesn't really leave things open for a sequel. How rare. And while we're talking about slasher movies, I want to know right now, what is the slasher movie that you want more people to see? You let me know in the comments section down below. Number 8, Judas and the Black Messiah. Judas and the Black Messiah is one of those films that just makes you, well, angry. Very angry. It tells the shocking true story of how Black Panther leader Fred Hampton, played by Daniel Kaluuya, who netted a well-deserved Best Supporting Actor Oscar for his efforts, was assassinated on the FBI's initiative. The film's main character is FBI informant William O'Neill, played by Lakeith Stanfield, who becomes close to Hampton and is then forced to portray him. And the film's closing titles reveal he eventually took his own life. As it should go without saying, it is a grim watch, as it should be. And though it is an accomplished work by most metrics, it's not really an enjoyable film to sit through. Not every film needs to be enjoyable, of course, and enjoyment is in itself an incredibly subjective metric personal to each and every viewer. But it can be prohibitive to revisiting one should the opportunity arise, which seems very much applicable to Shaka King's ceaselessly grim but powerful story. Number 7, Beau is Afraid. Ari Aster's 3-hour-long Freudian anxiety fest is one of the wildest horror films you you will ever see. The WTF moments never ever stop coming. And regardless of what you feel about this divisive slice of off-kilter horror, one thing is for sure, you'll never forget it. Beau is Afraid is undeniably self-indulgent and uneven, but it's also a rather extraordinary film in many ways. Asta, with help from an excellent Joaquin Phoenix, crafted a visually stunning and dizzyingly creative cinematic representation of anxiety and paranoia, and it's damn near impossible not to respect the project's audacity and scope. It doesn't reach the highs of Hereditary, but it's arguably a more accomplished work than Midsommar, Asta's more acclaimed sophomore feature. Having said all of this, it is unlikely that many would want to watch it again. Why? Aside from the stamina-testing length, it's also an overwhelming and anxiety-inducing work to the extent that the thought of another viewing just feels a bit exhausting. Life's hard enough, okay? Besides, as said earlier, it's not like you'll forget it in a hurry anyhow, so a second viewing is hardly required. Number 6. The Zone of Interest. The Zone of Interest is a tremendous film that not only ranks among the finest Holocaust films to date, but it's possibly the most unique one of them all. Beautifully shot, thematically rich, and tragically relevant, it is definitely a film that should be seen. But like with many films about the Holocaust, it's not necessarily a film people will be rushing to revisit. Zone of Interest doesn't actually show any of what is happening in Auschwitz on screen, but you certainly hear it. The sounds of death and terror are heard echoing over the camp walls throughout the film, courtesy of its exemplary, rightly Oscar-winning sound design. All while we witness the carefree, largely idyllic lives of Commandant Rudolf Hoss, played by Christian Friedel, and his family living in a house next to the death camp. The contrast between what we see and what we hear is chilling, especially since Hoss and his relatives are presented as such normal, unremarkable figures. In short, The Zone of Interest is a potent representation of the banality of evil and the complicity of everyday people in unimaginable atrocities. So for many, it will be too disturbing to see again, and that's fair enough. Number 5. The Father. The Father is arguably one of the greatest movies of the decade so far. It is a tough one to watch though. This intimate, low-key drama places viewers in the shoes of a man named Anthony who is losing his mind to dementia. With devices such as nonlinear chronology, disorientating editing, and changing actors recreating his sense of confusion to harrowing effect. The film's power is heightened further by the efforts of Anthony Hopkins, who gives perhaps the greatest performance of his entire career, and that is saying a hell of a lot. He's produced more incredible performances than I've had hot dinners. Eventually, the film reaches its heartbreaking ending. Anthony, now in his nursing home, sobs in the arms of one of his nurses, played by Olivia Williams. And this miserable conclusion feels inevitable from the very beginning. The Father is an outstanding film, and it absolutely should be watched, especially as it provides valuable and respectful commentary on a terrible illness that affects so many people all over the world. It is one of those movies where you can't really face watching it again, but feel enriched and enlightened for having encountered it at least once. Number 4. Speak No Evil 2022. This excellent horror thriller centers on a Danish family going to stay with a Dutch family they met on holiday in the remote Netherlands countryside, and the film mines a lot of uncomfortable horror from this simple setup. Throughout the film, the Dutch couple, Patrick and Karen, played by Fedja van Huet and Carina Smulders, violate social boundaries and behave in uncomfortable, aberrant ways that should have had their guests running for the hills. Unfortunately, the Danish couple, Bjorn and Louise, played by Morten Burian and Sidsel CM Koch, are too worried about offending their hosts, and so they simply take it. That is, right up until the Dutch couple are revealed as a pair of serial killers who proceed to kidnap Bjorn and Louise's daughter and cut out her tongue for good measure, and then stone the Danes to death. Lovely. Just before this, Bjorn asks Patrick why he's doing this. Patrick replies, "Because you let me." Not only is the film miserable, it'll also leave many feeling angry and exasperated due to the Danish couple's stupidity. Now normally that would be a negative. Here it seems this sense of frustration was precisely the point though, as writer-director Christian Taftrup designed the film as a satire of excessive politeness in certain societies. In other words, it's a film that wants to make you angry, so job done. But as good as the film is, sitting through such an avoidable tragedy for a second time would just be too much. Thanks for checking out this list today, my friend, and if you're enjoying yourself, then hit that subscribe button down below and you will get more of these What Culture videos in your life. Number 3. Quo Vadis Ida. Perhaps the films that are most likely to end up on a list such as this one are films that depict real-life tragedies, and Quo Vadis Ida is possibly the single most devastating such film of the decade so far. Internationally co-produced, this war drama tells the story of the Srebrenica genocide through the eyes of UN translator Ida, who tries to protect her husband and 2 sons from the genocidal intent of the Serbian army. She doesn't succeed and ends up losing her entire family. It's a frighteningly upsetting movie, especially thanks to Jasna Juricic's harrowing performance as Ida, and a second viewing would be difficult to fathom. A first watch proves a suspenseful experience as we watch Ida rushing around and trying to negotiate safe passage for her family, but struggling thanks to the badly organized operation. Of course, a tragic ending seemed likely, but not inevitable, and no doubt most were hoping and praying that Ida would save her family. Watching this maddening struggle against the UN's bureaucracy while knowing the outcome would be painful beyond measure. And as it should go without saying, the knowledge that these events not only happened for real but happened less than 30 years ago makes an already heartbreaking film even more gut-punching. It leaves your faith in humanity badly shaken, and it will stay with you for a long time, so you most likely won't feel the need to revisit. Number 2. All Quiet on the Western Front. All Quiet on the Western Front deserves to be ranked among the finest war films of the 21st century. A devastating, ferociously intense First World War epic, buoyed with a thoughtful script, a stellar cast, and masterful direction. Still, most viewers probably clocked that this would be their only viewing as soon as the film ended, for one specific reason. Of course, the film is a harrowing and violent nightmare that director Edward Berger films like a fully-fledged horror movie, and the constant deaths of the characters are difficult to take. It's also another film that's likely to make audiences angry as they witness German generals and politicians thoughtlessly sacrificing over 1 million soldiers to serve their own needs. These themes feel chillingly relevant right now, as multiple terrible conflicts rage around the world. But at the same time, plenty of other great war movies do that too. No, what really makes this film hard to rewatch is the ending, which is once again frustrating, but in the best sort of way. At the film's end, General Friedrichs, played by David Streisau, orders the soldiers to attack the nearby French troops on the morning of Armistice Day, hoping to fit in one final German victory before 11 o'clock that day. As a result, protagonist Paul, played by Felix Kammerer, dies seconds before the war ends. A heartbreaking and rage-inducing outcome punctuated by the knowledge that almost 3,000 soldiers on both sides of the conflict were killed on what should have been a day of peace. I'm still mad about it. It's a terrific ending that hammers home the film's anti-war message in crushing fashion, but it does mean that a second viewing would be a bit difficult to stomach. Number 1. The Iron Claw. And finally, if there's one recent film that's too upsetting to sit through again, it is unquestionably The Iron Claw. This wrestling drama is a great movie, and the fact that the Oscars ignored it remains a huge injustice. But in fairness, perhaps it was simply too upsetting for voters. The film recounts the history of the Von Erich family of wrestlers, which is one of those true stories you simply could not make up. The family were beset with tragedy after tragedy, thanks in no small part to the terrible parenting of the family's toxic patriarch, played by Holt McCallany, and by the end of the film, only Kevin and never better Zac Efron is left alive, having lost all 4 of his brothers. If a fiction film had told this story, it would have been criticized for being unbelievable, but unfortunately, this really happened. In real life, there was another brother who also died. Writer-director Sean Durkin decided to cut him out though, judging that another death would make the film unbearable. But as things stand, the film is already one that will crush you emotionally. There are several scenes towards the end, such as Kevin imagining his brothers in the afterlife, and him crying while being comforted by his young boys, that are genuinely traumatic. Yeah, I'm still not over this. That's not me criticizing though. It's one of the most affecting films in recent memory. Nevertheless, sitting through this heartbreaking story a second time could be torturous for a great many movie lovers.